Okay, so welcome everyone. We're going to get started. We're still expecting Councilmember Burns, but there are a lot of you, I think, who want to give public comment tonight, so we want to try to get started. I'm calling the meeting to order, holding off declaring a quorum, but we'll be there soon. And Councilmember Reed is participating.
We can hear. Do you have a
Yes.
I don't.
We do not.
Oh, good. Yeah,
Childcare issue.
okay. I will try to speak really loudly, but we don't have a microphone. So so Councilmember Reed is participating virtually, and 4 of us are here, and Councilmember Burns is showing up here. Oops, here he comes. All right, excellent. So I declare a quorum, and our first item is to have public comment, and I understand we have quite a few people that have signed up.
Okay, so first.
And given how many we have signed up, if you could be succinct, that would be appreciated.
So we have one person who signed up for written comments since I last emailed you guys written comments. Carlos, did you want me to read your comment, or would you like to give it?
Okay, I'll
It's up to you. Okay.
Dana and I worked hard to present what the landlords think is a fair assessment for the proposed revisions. I will make sure that each of you get a copy, but I just want to highlight 2, 3 or 4 this evening. No provisions regarding bed bugs. The City of Evanston should create a bed bug information brochure for the housing providers to attach to the lease. Additionally, the tenant should be required to inform the landlord within 30 days of the beginning of the lease term if the unit has bed bugs. After 30 days, the tenant is responsible for removal of the bed bugs. Next, ordinance concerns consideration 5383. Notice of lease non-renewal requires 30-day notice. This item should be eliminated from the proposed ordinance. 120 days is excessive and unreasonable. Problematic tenants could cause danger, such as excessive noise. When presented with a notice of termination, some tenants will retaliate by not paying rent, damaging the landlord's property, threatening other tenants in the building or the housing provider. 30 days notice is sufficient. No provisions against lease non-renewal or no fault. This item should be eliminated from the proposed ordinance. This is not an eviction. This is a non-renewal of a lease. Housing providers don't want to spend time not renewing the leases of good tenants. We have to spend a significant amount of time repairing units once tenants move out, and a lot of time screening and approving new tenants for our units. Housing providers have a variety of reasons when they will not renew a tenant's lease. Smoking in a non-smoky building, having pets when pets are pet-free, moving in persons that are not on the lease, nuisance or threatening other tenants, neighbors or the housing provider, criminal damage to the unit, or building or destroying other tenants' property. And the list goes on. Housing providers do not need any government entity for leasing a non-renewal of a lease and making non-renewal a criminal act. And last, Article 5443, $300 or more month's rent, whichever is greater, paid to the tenants moving due to condo conversion. This item should be eliminated from the proposed order. As previously stated, 30 days notice is sufficient for relocation for all tenants, regardless of sale, rehab, rent increase, or non-renewal. Housing providers are not responsible for the relocation of their tenants. Perhaps the City of Evanston should create a local housing relocation website to connect tenants with current available units. Currently, tenants can go to websites such as Housing Search, Apartments.com, Zillow, or Rent.com to find available units. This is not the housing provider's responsibility. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Lindsay, we have a copy of that, do we?
Yeah,
Oh, and you'll send that to us?
yeah.
Yeah, great, okay, thank you. And next?
Okay, next we have Jim Schermerhorn.
All committee members for your time this evening, everyone else who came in attendance. Don't have a lot of specific things to talk about regarding these, other than one specific thing is the restricting the late fees being like 5%. Or some of the other formulas, it's like 4% or 3.5%. But the most generous one on the table is a 5% late fee for a late rent. Well, the City of Evanston Water Department bills 10% late fee for water, for sewer, and for the portions of some buildings that have waste removal charges. If you're late on those, it's a 10% fee that has to be paid to the entity of the city. And then other more broad things are, in general, maybe if I can respectfully ask that the city looks at ways to lead by example, such as the upper floors of this building used to house people. Maybe some housing should be created in the upper floors of this building. There's the other buildings on this land, this big parcel of land. Everything goes well with the housing of people upstairs here, and that goes well, you need more. Maybe the city should look into constructing a building and provide housing here.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Kettler. Oh, sorry, Carl Kettler.
There's been enough information submitted on item by item that I don't feel that I need to go through all of that. One thing that struck me is that the memorandum that put this on the agenda in the first place that came from the city staff, the wording on that was whether the proposed updates should be incorporated or if further information and inquiry is required before a decision can be made. Well, the survey that went out, and I presume all of you read the questions on the survey that went to the residents in the city. By my quick back-of-the-envelope calculations, last census says we have 27,900 households in Evanston. The presentation from the city is that 43% of Evanston are renters, so that means that there must be about 12,000 rental households. There were 405 tenant responses. That represents 3.4% of renters, which is a pitifully small number to be representing that this is a significant issue for the people. Housing, it's free market. I'm a small landlord. I only have 6 units, and frankly, I rarely advertise my units because usually word of mouth gets me a new tenant. I don't get complaints from my tenants. In fact, I get actually the opposite from my tenants in general. I feel like several of the issues that are being brought up here in the proposal are additionally restrictive. I don't think that I would be impacted by them based on the relationship that I have with my tenants, but I also, in the general concept of a free market, I don't feel that it needs to be there as a legislated requirement to make some of these changes. I actually, based on what staff said or is further information and inquiry required, I would say that with a 3.4% response, I'd say, yeah, they need to go back and get more input from the community, from the rental community. They need a larger representation. 3% or 3.5% of the population is not enough to warrant even the amount of time that we're spending here talking about it tonight.
Thank you.
Aaron Bornstein.
Hi, my name's Aaron Bornstein. I'm a housing provider here in Evanston. I bought probably about 10 or 15 years ago during the Great Recession. I own about 8 units, so I'm a pretty small operator. My units are mostly in a lower income area, and when I purchased my units, there were something like 200 foreclosed and vacant units in Evanston at that time. I came down here today to talk about these proposed changes because I think that Evanston is going in a very bad direction with these ideas. And that you're gonna spark your next housing crisis if you move forward with some of these. Tina and Carlos's proposals, I got a chance to see those are excellent. If you guys go in the direction that Tina and Carlos have indicated, that solves almost all of my concerns. This is something the real estate community can get behind. If you stick with these ideas, they're very bad. And the worst of them all is the just cause ordinance. That is the one that is really scary. And I don't know if you're familiar with exactly what this means. What it means is it's totally imbalanced. So if I have a tenant and our lease is up, the tenant can walk away from that lease for any reason at all, no questions asked, like it's a free country, their lease is up and they can do as they please. If I, as the landlord, wanna not renew that lease because I have a tenant who's damaged my property, who's causing problems in the building, I don't have that right. I'm stuck now with this person and they can continue to cause harm. So if this person, I'm getting reports that they're sexually harassing one of the women in the building, and I don't want to have this person in my building, I said, that's it. I no longer have the ability to non-renew them. I have to take the side of the sexual harasser, and the victim of this attack, now she's the one who's going to move out, because she's not going to stay in the building. If I have a hoarder in the building, if I have someone who's just a slob, and they get cockroaches, they get mice in the building, then those mice don't respect the unit boundaries, they move into the rest of the building. Again, what am I to do? I tell the person to clean your unit. If they could clean their unit, we wouldn't be in this place in the first place. So I lose the ability to say, hey, I'm gonna move out the one who's causing the problem. Instead, all of my clean tenants, who of course find it totally unacceptable to have roaches infesting their unit, they move out. And so Evanston then takes the side of the cockroaches. This does not take the side of the people who want to do the right thing. So the list could go on. Some other people have mentioned some of these. My tenant parties all night, if they run an unlicensed business, if they bring a pet into a pet-free building, if they smoke in a smoke-free building, all of these things that I would not go to court to evict over, but I say, look, you follow the rules, but we're not renewing your lease. You take that tool out of my toolbox, and now I'm stuck with someone who damages my property. I hope you will not go down this path. I know Cook County looked at this about a year and a half ago. They rejected just cause. They did not do just cause when they redid their landlord-tenant ordinance. State of New York, they just looked at this as well in their spring legislative session. They rejected this, presumably for many of the reasons that I'm outlining. This is a really bad idea. I urge you in the strongest possible terms, take a look at what Tina and Carlos have put together. Those are strong things that make Evanston better. And this idea, if you take anything from my little comments tonight, please do not do just cause. It is terrible. It will make Evanston the least investable community in Chicagoland. People will go to Skokie, they will go to Wilmette, they will go to Chicago. They will not look to put their dollars in Evanston because they don't want to have to take the side of a sexual harasser over this victim. They don't want to have to keep a hoarder who damages the entire building. So I hope you'll take that to heart.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lori Morrell.
I could stay right here. I don't think that's necessarily speaking about, right?
Well, the microphone is there for people that are trying to hear me.
Yeah,
but I think the microphone's over here.
All right. Did you use previous teachers know how to project? Okay, is that better? You hear me a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay. I would say that your tenant responses to the survey are probably the more of the disgruntled tenants. If I was a happy tenant, I would say, oh, I don't really need this. But there are a certain number of people that regard the landlord-tenant or relationship as an adversarial one. I don't feel that way, but some tenants feel that way until maybe they experience that you're a good landlord. Right now, I have 3 buildings that have a total of 76 units in Evanston, and probably had property in Evanston for more than 20 years. This idea of the just cause, I agree with Aaron, makes it very difficult, and I'll give you an example. I had a smaller building at one time, and I had somebody with a kid that was a juvenile delinquent. So after school, the kids would come, they'd hang out in the hall, they would smoke cigarettes, they would do damage. I asked the tenants, please just call me when they come, and the police would come right away. But the tenants don't want to get involved. So eventually, yeah, I mean, that's a lease you wouldn't renew. And when they left, suddenly, surprisingly, I didn't have the juvenile delinquents, I had to replace all the carpeting up to the 3rd floor and repaint the hall. And I lost 2 tenants during that process because, you know, there was nothing they could do. But this is the problem. You might say, well, there's legal recourse. You could go to court and say, this tenant is doing, you know, this antisocial behavior. No tenants are going to testify. Never had a tenant who was willing. They'll call me and complain, and I'll say, call the police. Oh, I don't want to get involved. Or, would you go to court? Oh, my God, they're totally shocked with that. And so, therefore, I can't go to court and say, I have this tenant who's antisocial in this particular way, and the tenant would say, oh, I'm sorry, Judge, I'll never do it again. I didn't do it, and I'll never do it again. So, I mean, at the moment, I have no vacancies except one persistent eviction that I'm trying to get rid of. The guy has not paid rent since December. This is June. The sheriff has not come yet. I've spent more than $4,000 on legal and missed more than $14,000 in rent, and I'm following everything in the legal way that I could. The tenants have a lot of tools. They can go to court and say, can I have a little more time? Oh, maybe I'd like a jury trial. There are a lot of things that tenants who are somewhat problematic can do. And as a landlord, you're just following the rules. I didn't raise my rents a lot. That's why my tenants stayed. But I want to not punish the good ones by not having a way to at least not renew my choice. I don't do it just because somebody's a pain. You know, I do it because they're really causing problems. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Eileen Thomas. I'm going to talk about something different, but everyone else has done a very good job. I really don't understand this non-renewal that has to have clause. We all have contracts with organizations, and they expire. They just expire. At this point, with what you're saying, is my tenant, they want to stay, essentially owns my property and has more rights in my property than I do. So I have spent 40 years, put in a lot of our own money, no tips, no anything like that, and time. And somebody who the second they signed that lease, whether good or bad, has more rights in that unit than I do. And so I have a handicap accessible unit. We're getting older. I would like to maybe move into it if we get to a point where we cannot stay in our own place. You're telling me that I cannot do that. That I have to do something else, maybe spend my money to, I don't know, get another apartment. I have no rights at that point in my
Thank you.
James McKee.
Hi, I'm Jim McKee. I was here last month. And I'm a small landlord. I have 39 rental units here in Evanston. And I just wanted to sort of add to my comments from last month. And, I mean, everybody else has stated it's a very nice place, especially got here with the blue shirt and something. But when it comes to the just cause, I've been a landlord here in Evanston for over 30 years, and I don't know if I've ever not renewed somebody's lease. I use non-renewal as a threat to get somebody to, I tell people, here's your behavior that needs to change if you want your lease to be renewed. And it's like a negotiating strategy. And if I don't have that, I have no power to change bad behavior in my buildings. And who's really gonna suffer? I mean, I would suffer as a landlord, but who really suffers are the neighbors, the other tenants in the building. And I just have to tell you from my experience, you can have one bad tenant who can just make life miserable for the whole building. And if I don't have the ability to tell that person, you're out when your lease is up, it would be terrible. So I'll stop there. But one other thing, unrelated, that I wanted to comment on. You know, I read through the Cook County changes that were made, and they have a real specific description of what the adequate heat is supposed to be. And Evanston does not in our ordinance, but Evanston has a requirement that, you know, where the landlord provides the heat, it needs to be 68 degrees, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And I have to tell you how that's unbelievably ridiculous, because, you know, at night people like it cooler, and to say that the whole building needs to be kept at 68 degrees when Chicago and Cook County require 65 degrees, it's wasteful, and it's, you know, there's climate action goals the city is committed to meet, and to require this is I just think it's terrible. It's wasteful, and I have had cases where a particular tenant wants it warm at night. I have to turn up the heat for the whole building, other people have their windows open. So I would like, since that's in the Cook County ordinance, I would just like to throw that out there. I hope you would consider equalizing Evanston's heat requirements with Cook County and Chicago. 65 at night, 68 during the day.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's see, next we have Michael Thomas?
Good evening. As a landlord, I find myself in a situation that I've often seen in business. Some group of stakeholders in an organization identify problems, maybe real problems, and solving those problems would actually be good for the organization. They put forward a set of proposals that are based entirely on their perspective on the problem, or tunnel vision from what they see from their perspective. Well, once that proposal gets into an organization, it has kind of a life of its own. When you find yourself trying to present contrary views, you find yourself in a situation where 90% of your negotiating room has already been taken by the provisions made by the other party. This usually has a very bad result. And when you look at the results we're going to get here, you can see unintended consequences, counterproductive results, the potential for sitting in the legal battles, the people who have better lawyers and more money than they do, the possibility of preemption by the state. Municipal ordinances are seen to be overreach. All these things are predictable. What can we do about that? Well, the best thing you can do is take very seriously the experience of people in this room. These are people who have between us centuries and centuries of experience at actually managing property. We don't have to agree with all our perspectives on our proposals. But think of it this way. I'm not telling you what can't be done. We're telling you what you have to do whatever you want to do successfully. And if I was in business and I saw the situation presented by this ordinance, what I would say is, full stop. It's time to stop moving forward and to go back and start consulting with all the stakeholders to identify real problems. Some of the problems we're attempting to solve here don't actually appear to be real problems, they're prevalent problems. And in consultation with all the stakeholders, come up with a proposal that actually tries to achieve real objectives. Is to have fair and equitable treatment for tenants in Evanston, the housing providers. I really encourage you at this point to simply stop. To simply say, we have a large number of people here who have strong opinions that are grounded in real experience. Even if we don't agree with them completely, we ought to take that seriously. Rethink the whole procedure, looking at each of these proposals individually. Then, where we can identify real problems, try and find real solutions that reflect the real experience of all the participants and stakeholders.
Next, we have Eric Passett.
Hi, I'm Eric Passett from North Shore Apartments and Condos, and I've been a resident probably 35 years. So I've been in the rental business probably, in the landlord business probably, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but probably at least 35 years. And the Evanston landlord-tenant ordinances are already in place. I know them backwards and forwards, probably like the back of my hand. And they're already pretty restrictive as they are. Okay? You come up, some of them I actually helped write, about right before actually you came into on the council, when Mark Miller was part of it, we actually rewrote the nuisance laws. That was when that became a part of it. And so my point of all this is if you enact the more stuff you're already putting in there, we already have a landlord-tenant ordinance pretty lengthy. And if you study it, it 100% favors the tenant over the landlord. 100%. And now we're going to add, prohibit the collections of attorney fees for tenants in eviction. So if the tenant hasn't paid rent for, say, 6 months or a year, whatever the case may be, during the pandemic it was a disaster. So now if you add something like this in there, we can't collect attorney fees for somebody we're trying to evict. They were paying rent, we wouldn't be trying to evict them. So that's one thing. Then if they try to change their locks, I can understand why tenants would want to change their locks for violence against them. But if the landlord's not a part of it, say there's an emergency, how do we get into it? How do we get into their there's a fire. How do we get into their units? So my point of all this is, if we want to make some changes, we should slow this all down. And what we did last time is Mayor Tiswell actually got a committee together of landlords, a couple of them. Dan Schermerhorn was one of them.
Me too.
Yes, okay, there was myself, and there was somebody else, and actually sit down and try to hash this out. And try to come up with something reasonable, because if you come up with stuff that where evidence is going to be let's say, uninvestable, why would people come in? Why would landlords want? We always try to keep our rents down. We don't take glory out of trying to raise rents. We do because expenses have gone up enormously. Since 5 years ago, it's been crazy. So my point of it is you got to try to look at it from another point of view, which most of the stuff in there is not. And I would say we just try to slow this down. There's no, and then form a committee where you have a couple landlords who are part of this. And last time we came up with the nuisance laws, we came up with some real good ideas that actually are still in effect 20 years later.
Thank you.
I am having a hard time reading this name. Okay.
No,
Yeah, it was Mary Rosinski.
Where am I supposed to stand?
Right here.
Okay, hi, I'm Mary Rosinski. I'm also a realtor. I'm speaking on behalf of the realtors. There's 33,000 of us in northern Illinois. But as a landlord too here in Evanston, my husband ran a property management company for like 25 years. And most of the landlords are really decent. And most of the tenants are really decent. And we're an industry and we're an economic engine in this city. And laws like this are apt to cause disinterest in investing in Evanston. I don't think we want to do that because we support the local stores, the Moys and the Heralds and all those places. And if you tie our hands, we're not gonna wanna do that. You wouldn't wanna let someone come into your apartment, or your house, and then, let's say they can rent your basement and then not be able to stay, not renewing your lease. I mean, this is our property, or I look at it too, it's like a restaurant. Someone comes in and they're really misbehaving and not paying, and you have to say, no, you have to keep beating them and let them stay. I think if you look at us as an industry, you might approach this differently, and I think we just need to have that right to evict. We don't want to collect late fees, we want to keep our tenants. Most of us, as I have gotten to know some of the people, we work with our tenants. I know with my tenant, if she says I'm gonna be 2 weeks late, I'm like, okay, because I know she's going to. I don't need a late fee. And most of us, I think, work with it. You want to keep your good tenants. So I just want you to keep that in mind, and don't be punitive, don't tie our hand, and let us bring people to us.
Thank you.
Amy DeMarte. Lock it in.
Hi, I'm Sue Wolbach. I work at Connections for the Homeless. You guys have a really hard job here. We know at Connections how desperately important it is to have boards that we can work with, that have the support they need, that have the income that they need. We also know that we are hiring more and more staff to help people get into apartments and to stay in their apartments. And we also are raising money all the time to help pay late fees, security deposits, relocation, attorneys to help with people who are being evicted, all kinds of things. So not only are we working with people who are already homeless for a variety of reasons, but we're also having to deal with issues of people actually being able to stay in their apartments. And most of the landlords we work with are actually really good. Most of the people who are calling us with these problems are people we have not worked with before, but they are on the verge of becoming, because they can't afford some of these. So the need to balance, you guys are all aware of this, and you are working with experts, you're working with the landlords, you're working with the housing advocates, the Cook County Board. I guess my main message is to please, even though the majority of the people not speaking on, I think that is where the heart of this is. So meeting the needs of residents, while also meeting landlords and their needs. For the housing safety, so that we can.
Thank you.
Tina Hayden.
Good evening. As many of you know, I'm Tina Payton, and my family has been providing affordable housing for over 50 years here in Evanston. These ordinance that you're trying to pass will only make the housing crisis in Evanston and beyond worse. What's happened is there's a nationwide push for just cause. And this is a sad attempt to cure our affordable housing crisis by forcing us to keep people in the units so you don't have to spend money to place them somewhere else. This is not the solution. You need to work with us, many of us here, smaller landlords, and try to solve the issues around affordable housing. Right now, as I've presented before, you have a lot of big luxury buildings, and the average rent is $3,000 and $4,000 a month, which many of us here do not charge. So instead of working with people like us, you're penalizing us right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to get upset and mad and sell to what they call is a REIT. That's a real estate investment trust. I read somewhere recently that one real estate investment trust owns 24,000 single-family homes over 18 states. That is a bus that's leaving quickly. And that was what's going to happen to Evanston. So are you really trying to preserve affordable housing? Or are you just trying to penalize the landlords that are providing the affordable units? Now, you have no city-funded program currently exists to mitigate risk for landlords providing affordable housing. So you might think, I say, agree to, yes, you should have a fund. Well, if you did, you should write me a check for over $100,000 for the damages that I presented to you in the past. This item should be eliminated from the proposed ordinance. Instead of the city of Evanston should require tenants to take more responsibility of their own actions. Many times, tenants that are on local programs do not pay their security deposits. They have no vested interest in the upkeep of their units. These following actions should take place. A, require renter's insurance for all tenants. If a tenant can pay a cable television bill for $200 a month, then they can come up with $100 for 1 year of rental insurance. The agency, like Sue said, Connections helps with a lot of fees. Let them pay for the renter's insurance for the year. B, many times, many tenants on a program have caseworkers or social workers. Instead of meeting at the office, the caseworker or social worker needs to make regular home visits to make sure that the tenant is keeping an orderly household free of tenant damages, such as broken blinds, holes in the walls, removing smoke detectors and their batteries so they will not work properly, etc. When the city of Evanston conducts an inspection on the building, tenant damages should not equate to a violation for the housing provider. The city needs to give the tenant a code violation for lack of upkeep. Tenants should be eliminated from the program if they do not uphold their duties as a tenant. I will tell you right now that the Housing Authority of Cook County has done a better job over the past. If the tenant's place is not kept up, they put their rent into abatement, and if they do not successfully fix and repair their damages to our units, then they will be eliminated from the program. This needs to happen here in Evanston, and we need to start setting examples. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Schermerhorn?
Thank you for your time. I'm Bill Skirmerhorn. Family business, been in Evanston forever, and we are third-party management, basically. So we've got a lot of clients that we work for that we're representing here. And I gotta tell you that there's a lot of things that I wanna say. One thing is, we are definitely a big engine. The amount of taxes that go out, the amount of employees that we have, the Evanston Home Depot, I think we're one of the biggest consumers there. We do a lot of stuff. And everything that you're telling us is really tying our hands. And I gotta tell you, I think karma is a real thing, and we just try to do the right thing. Okay, I'll give you an example. It happened to me today. I had a tenant, and we usually gives out lease extensions. We offer lease extensions several months before that lease is up. I have an elderly lady that says, I'm absolutely not renewing. So we ended up, confirming that, and she said she's not renewing. This son just called me and said, my mom has nowhere to go. I already had someone that was ready to rent that space. I unwound the whole entire deal so she could stay, because I felt it was the right thing to do. She's getting older. She didn't quite have her wits about her. We unwound everything. Everyone was happy. We didn't, get any, no one was moving or anything like that. What my point is we do a lot of things that's just the right thing to do. And I tell you, all of our owners, they'll do the same thing. We have someone who says, I haven't raised her rent for 10 years because she's been with us for 50. There's things like that happen all the time that I don't think that if you're not in the business, you don't know. Everything that's on here is just something that ties our hands, and I really believe the people that are in this business, that stay in this business, that do it, are really trying to do the right thing. And the problem that I think this all has is, it seems like you're trying to protect the bad apples. Mm-hmm. You're really trying to say that you tie our hands. I mean, I've got people that call me up and go, I don't know what's going on up there, but it's going on, they're partying until 2 o'clock in the morning. I say, call the police. And all due respect with the police, they're great. They come, but they say there's nothing we can do. You gotta file a report, you gotta do this. So we have to do all this paperwork. And if we can't tell that tenant, look, I can go to evict you, it's good. I know it's gonna take me 6 to 9 months to do it, because that's the reality, okay? But I can say to them, I'm not gonna renew you. So look, everyone around you is complaining. Because I never say who's complaining, because you don't want to have, people after other people in the building, but you say everyone's complaining, and I'm not going to renew you. That can change, like you said. That can change someone's. I'm not going to have the guys over for the party all night long. We're going to go do it somewhere else. There's a lot of things that you're just tying our hands, and I read it and I can't believe it. Also, the fact that we have a lease in place, which is a legal document, sometimes I think it means zero. Because we go to the judge and say, they haven't paid, and first thing we're doing is we're wiping out all the late fees.
Yeah.
They just wipe out all the late fees. Yeah. Why is it even in there? Is it lawful? My attorney says it's lawful. And then the judge doesn't hold up. And I'm not trying to be mean, but they haven't paid for 9 months, and where else in this planet, the way it works in America, do you pay and you get services? You don't pay, you don't get services. You pay the water bill, you get it. You don't pay it, they cut you off. They cut the gas off. God forbid we make the news, we cut off the gas because we don't pay the bill, we don't heat the building. That's not going to happen. We don't do that. The tenant hasn't paid, zero consequences. I got someone who just walked, it was $10,000. That's a year's worth. Left. It's a whole year, she owes me rent. She left, finally. I was just happy that she left, And I worked with her for years, okay? She came in with a significant other. Then she had a a restraining order on him, and then the daughter came in, and then the son came in, and, you know, all this stuff. And I worked with her for, this is 8 years, I worked with her. The last time we got caught up was because her son had to get into Evanston High School, she gave proof of residency. I said, get caught up, okay? And I said, but we're gonna go month to month. You slip, I'm gonna exercise my right. And she was good for a long time. If you take that away from me, you know, it's just not gonna work. You're gonna have a ton of people, and the people that are gonna suffer are, it's less than the 3% that we talked about, okay? It's less than the 3%. It's less than 1%, I do believe, that are bad, but they wreck everyone around them. So I've heard of other landlords that said, I'm going to pay the person $500 to leave because I'm afraid I'm going to lose everyone around them. Yeah. Well, that's a bad, from our point of view, being in business all these years, that's a bad precedent to set. Because now the word gets out, everyone thinks that we're an easy target. What's the sense of trying to be quiet? You know, we're just gonna cause a ruckus, someone's gonna pay us to leave. Again, you know, sometimes I wonder what the lease is worth, you know? And then to have a hook on a lease that it's not written anywhere that you want us to pay on the way out? What, like, can I trade in my rent-a-car and you pay me on the way out? I mean, I don't even understand it, you know? I just don't get that part. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think that other people have said this. If we don't work as a community and we don't work together, I think it's going to get worse, way worse before it gets better. Because, you know, this small percentage is saying, well, I had to move out. You know, if someone comes up to me and says, I want a 2-year lease, I'll probably give it to them. You know, if they qualify, I'll give it to them. But they're saying they want a 1-year lease because they want the flexibility. That's why you rent, because you have flexibility. But then you want it on the back end too, you can say, oh, you know, I can stay. What's the sense of having a lease? I mean, I don't get it. It's got to work both ways, right? So, I really think this is way overreaching, and I think that it's very short-sighted, and I think it puts way too much burden on the landlord, and the bad tenants are going to run away with this, and the good tenants are going to suffer. And I think it's also going to drive the cost up for everybody. And I don't think that any of us want to do that, because we want to stay housing providers. We want to keep full. We want to have everyone happy. I tell people this all the time. You have to be neighborly. You have to be neighborly. And most people are like, I get it. You know, I understand. So,
yeah.
You know,
Okay.
I'll get the squeaky bed. I had someone take the, you know, the box spring, went out, and they put it on the floor because it squeaked. They're like, geez, I didn't even know.
Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
anyhow.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Joan Schermerhorn? Hi, I'm Joan Schermerhorn. I will be as long-winded as my brother. It's kind of eerie for me to be here. This is my old English room. This is the middle school. Before the city bought it. It's a little strange to be here, but our family was in rental business back then, when I was in high school here. And, it's been our livelihood, it's fed our families. We've employed a lot of, service providers. We depend on our tenants, to pay the rent and the mortgages. Our owners take a lot of risk. They buy that big building, have a mortgage on it. So we want to do everything we can to help our owners be profitable and also be able to give good product for a good price. So I kind of think that it comes down to personal responsibility when you have a lease in place. There's
things the tenants have to do, and there's certain things the landlords have to do. Everyone has to be held to a high standard on that. So, it should be a level playing field for both the tenants and the landlords. They should live up to their responsibility. I don't think it's fair to tip the scale, or tip it so that the landlord is being held to a standard that is they're less able to maneuver. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Lisa Pildes.
Hi, Lisa Pildes, 50-year resident of Evanston. I own 23 units in the first, fifth, sixth, and seventh ward. Yes to everything everyone said. My first impression from reading the considerations was nobody who wrote this, the landlord. Actually, it seems like nobody who wrote this is in business of any kind. Really, you know. I guess that's all I want to say. There's one item here that nobody just talked about that I hope you'll scrap this whole thing, but the more than 120 days notice for rent increases. We've all lived through these past few years. We've seen what gas bills have gone up. For example, we've seen property taxes go up. 4 months, you don't know 4 months ahead of time what your expenses are going to be. It's very hard to try to take a gamble. And of course, if you're trying to figure that out, you're gonna make it higher maybe than it needs to be because you're speculating about what it costs us. And I would say, other than the mortgage, property taxes are the biggest expense on a building. You know, we're being reassessed. Last year, the second installment didn't come out until December. It was many months late, and you just have no idea what your property taxes are going to be. And again, if you're trying to set your rent, you're going to set it higher than maybe you would need to if you actually had some concrete figures.
Thank you.
Katie Smith.
So I didn't actually sign up to speak, but since you called me, just wanted to remind you I testified last time, and I just wanted to stand here as an avatar of a different kind of landlord, the owner-occupied two-plus. And our issues are different. I don't think of myself as a housing provider, or it's not a business. You asked me or my husband what our profession is, landlord, would not even occur to us. But the one thing I think we all share in common is just this idea of non-renewals is over the top, that this is a contract, that in this ordinance, only one person can leave, and that just at the top, on the face of it, is unjust. And by the way, I've only been a landlord for 5 years, for 25 years, and before that, I was a tenant, a renter. I could have answered that survey quite with a lot of knowledge, probably rented from somebody here. And even as a renter, I feel like there's a responsibility to live up to your side of the lease, and that, you know, the landlord, it's ultimately their property, and it's a two-sided contract that should have equal rights on both sides.
Thank you. All right, excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. That was very helpful to hear this detailed analysis of what we're talking about this week and last month, and yeah. Lindsay, should we go let you
Sure.
A quick
get
question,
us back?
Chair.
What?
If I may, just
I forgot minutes account.
Yes,
Are we gonna-
minutes being formed.
Oh, and quorum, okay.
Are we gonna discuss just cause today or no? Do you think we'll get to it? I don't know where it is in order.
I think we maybe talked about it already, but we could go back to it.
We haven't
Yes.
talked about it yet.
Oh,
I was gonna say, I don't think we have, yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
But we think we'll get to it today.
We're really hoping so, yeah.
Okay,
It's the
I
first
couldn't-
item on the agenda.
Okay, so,
After minutes. I will move approval of the minutes of our last meeting.
Great, thank you.
I think we have to do the quorum, maybe?
I did.
Oh, okay.
When Councilmember Burns came. So could I have a second?
Second.
Any comments, discussion? All in favor then of approval of the meeting minutes, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Thank you. Okay,
Chair?
now, back, yes.
I would like to move our first item for discussion, which is a continuation of discussion of potential changes to the city's property owner tenant ordinance.
Councilmember Reed, I don't think can move or vote.
I can move a motion. I'm fully, if we have a quorum, I'm a full participant.
I think if we have a quorum in person, you can do those things remotely, right?
Okay, all right,
Second.
great. Okay, onward with our discussion then.
I would raise my hand first to jump.
What was that?
I would raise my hand first to jump in here.
We have
Unless
a
you want to start with.
presentation.
Okay.
So Lindsay's going to kind of remind us where we are in the packet and discussion, right? Or is that what you plan to do, right?
Yes. Councilmember Reed, you're not able to see the slide deck yet, are you?
Are you sharing?
You have to reshare your screen.
Sorry,
I don't know if you
go back.
Yeah, share it right there. And Lindsay's gonna be providing some context on a few topics at a time, and then we'll open conversation if that works for the committee.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Same kind of format as last
That's
time.
okay. Yep, okay.
So we can not comment and see between.
You can, it's just she's gonna give like introduction information of the topic, and then we'll open conversation so that we have a group topic.
And when you mean open conversation, you mean amongst the committee members?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just, I just wanted to be,
All right.
thank you.
We discussed, a number of the items for consideration last month, and we are continuing that conversation again today. Just to recap, we are hoping to, help to adapt to the new realities of living in a post-COVID society. We want to implement modern solutions that have been offered to us by state, federal, and nonprofit policymakers and community advocates. So I want you guys to remember that these considerations were drafted in collaboration with fair housing organizations, through community engagement, and with policy and data analysis. So with that, I would also like to introduce our guest, Jonathan Raffensperger. Do you want to stand up? Yeah. I didn't get to do a formal intro last time, from Law Center for Better Housing. And we also have John Bartlett from Metropolitan Tenants Organization. Thank you, John. And Dominic Vaz from Open Communities. All right. During the pandemic, the government responded to the housing crisis in profound ways, and we want to make sure that we are able to see many of those responses permanently implemented.
There is no microphone. There is no microphone.
Well, what does it have?
Oh, it's a mic to record to,
Okay.
yeah, sorry about that. So we are seeking input from the committee about whether or not the RLTO should be amended with any of the items that we are discussing, or if there is more information needed. And then, so just to clarify, we've already discussed fair screening processes, prohibition of hidden and illegal fees, transparent and safe security deposits, and limiting late fees. So what you see in white, I know it's kind of hard to see the different colors, but what you see in white is what we have to discuss for tonight.
This cause is not next.
Right, so it's not the next thing, it's toward the end. All right, so, we will start with making the period secure consistent. So landlords and tenants need consistency and need to know when they can expect problems to be fixed. Currently, there is a difference depending on whether or not landlords are occupying the building. So we're looking to make that period secure more consistent. And this is in the context of material aspects of the lease. For example, removing unallowed pets, non-tenants living in the unit, or removing overflow from storage spaces, these kinds of material non-compliance issues. So we initially proposed a 10-day period to cure so that we could better align with Chicago and Cook County. And that, of course, is still on the table. However, some policy resources suggest extending the period to cure to 30 days. Many landlords in our feedback sessions also expressed that they would like a longer period of time for them to fix things. And it was also mentioned that we are unsure if property standards would be able to enforce a 10-day period to cure. But essentially, we are proposing a 10-day period to cure minimum across.
Right now, what is it?
It is 48 hours for owner-occupied building, like essentially a two-flat with the owner living in it, or 30 days for all other types of buildings and living arrangements.
Do you have any guidelines as to what is it that we're curing? Because, I mean, it could be anything. It could be a leaky faucet, it could be on the landlord side or on the tenant side. So, to me, that and a lot of the things that we talked about last week are still very unclear and not defined. It's a very broad brush that we're trying to use to paint this landlord-tenant ordinance.
So there is an ordinance around failure to provide essential services. So if there were something like a major plumbing issue, like the toilet won't work, or there's no running water, or there's so much water leaking out of a faucet that it's going to cause damage to the unit, then the landlord has to respond much more quickly than 10 days or 30 days, or whatever the committee decides on. I believe the same goes for tenants, although I don't think that that's an issue that really comes up for tenants, where they have to fix a leaky faucet, or have something that is an essential service that they're providing. But yeah, this is in regards to the period to cure material noncompliance specifically.
I can think of things that tenants also could need to fix or cure on a kind of urgent way. For instance, a portable air conditioner that is left leaking to the unit below, and the tenant is irresponsive, the one that has the air conditioner, and continues to leak below. Things that maybe a landlord doesn't see, it's their responsibility, but they don't see. There is this radiator that continuously leaks, and we don't know because we don't live there. But if the tenant doesn't say anything and it's costing a lot of money in damage to the units below, so there are a lot of issues that could come up under this that need cure. And I think that maybe a little bit more specificity on what is it that we're really talking about, for both sides. And I'm not saying, disregard responsibility. As you heard from pretty much all the landlords here, they're eager to continue to be responsible to their tenants. So, you know, I just can't see that we're opening a can of worms here without really having a way to address all the issues, especially if the city is not coming to enforce what we're talking about within the time specified. You know, if the city can't enforce it within 10 days, then what happens within 48 hours? And so there.
Right now, the 48 hours only stands for owner-occupied duplex.
And
It's 30 days.
Who's enforcing that? To the owner-occupied, to Mrs. Smith's, building, you know, she has a tenant that is not telling about something that is relevant. And so, I don't wanna be, nitpicking on this, but it seems to me that it's too broad. And we need to, maybe the emphasis I wanna make is on really thinking this through. There is a lot of discussion, and, you know, we were just told that we have talked about all the other items that we spoke about last time, our last meeting, but it's still, there is a lot of unknown of what really are we specifically talking about. And we're gonna make people responsible for unspecified things that we need to address on a daily basis for the operators and the owners of property.
Do you mean that for this,
And tenants,
or?
or for anything,
Lindsay, do we wanna maybe have, LCBH, if they can talk to
Yeah,
maternal
thank you.
compliance and, PRTQ and provide some context, because all of that is defined, we're just talking about timeline
We're
associated with
talking
that.
on this slide, I think we're kind of combining two ideas onto this one slide, which is, one, the landlord's right to terminate a lease for a tenant and because they're not complying with the lease municipal code. And two, you know, the tenant's right to end the lease because the landlord an issue. So we're really kind of talking about two things that are in different places in the ordinance, and we're saying probably for efficiency talk. Right now, yeah, it doesn't go time periods match. But I mean, I think those are two very different remedies. Like, you know, we're talking about having the city come out and enforce something. And that's, you know, usually you'd have that be, you know, in response to an issue with the landlord keeping the property up. But I mean, there's really no timing issue with the landlord telling your tenant your tenancy is over because you haven't fixed problems I've identified in my notice. So, I mean, 10 days, for, allowing, tenant to cure a curable problem with compliance with the lease where the municipal code is what exists in Chicago, it's what exists in Cook County, it exists across the state. Evanston is different, it allows more time in most cases, less time in a small number of cases. You know, in terms of how much time a landlord has after notice to fix a problem, you know, I think, in Chicago, and I believe also in Cook County, it's typically 14 days. That's just to provide the context for what exists in
14 days, I'm sorry, is what?
the amount of time after notice that a landlord has to fix a problem, you know, like a material non-compliance with municipal code with the lease, before the tenant can say, I'm gonna end the lease and move out.
And it's not just in the lease, it's
And
also,
essential services is a shorter time.
it's also they could pay for, they could decide to,
They
using their own money,
they
pay
could repair
for whatever the
or
repair
they
is,
could,
right?
in some circumstances,
Yeah.
withhold certain amount of
And
rent.
then withhold, right,
Yeah.
okay,
So, before they can exercise their rent.
okay, yeah.
Personally, I'm fine to standardize it to 10 days, as long as we think whatever role the city has to play in this in terms of enforceability, as long as we're confident that's gonna happen. What I think doesn't make sense is for us to knowingly make a recommendation that is unenforceable. So standardizing it with the state, I think, is fine.
And I'm sorry, just to make clear, what we're talking about really here is the timeline before the tenant can exercise their remedies that are kind of independent of what the city would do. So the tenant would, give the landlord notice that, hey, you haven't fixed this, I'm gonna end the lease and move out.
So then just to clarify, I think you said that there was concern about the ability of the city to enforce it, so what were you referencing then?
Some landlords in our landlord feedback session and community members questioned whether that was something our property standards department could enforce, whether or not they had the capacity to enforce that.
But
Or maybe even the jurisdiction is what.
yeah, it sounds like you're saying that's not the
So that was
city's
within
jurisdiction.
in the context of material aspects of the lease, like tangible. Such as the examples in the slide.
There are some cases where a tenant makes, has to make a complaint with the city, and the city has to witness it to be able to have it enforced. There are some scenarios where that happens.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Not all scenarios, but there are some where if the tenant wants to take action, they have to have the city witness that there is an issue.
And by taking action, you mean terminating the lease?
Yeah.
So can you give us examples of the ones that require that and which ones don't? I think we're having trouble.
I can provide it. I believe MTO had mentioned that, there were cases potentially with, issue with heat or other items. I don't know if, John, you may be able to speak to that.
I mean, I'm happy to provide more detailed information. I believe that the one that requires a city report is withholding rent in Edmonton. So I think that's the one that the city has to make a finding where the tenant can exercise. I think the other remedies don't require that, that's my recollection, but.
And John Bartlett, maybe I see you nodding from MTO.
I think that's the only one that really requires.
Yeah.
Hold rent that they. I think this is mostly dealing with, in my mind, that how long tenants have to make changes if they are violating the lease, working in the period. It's like, for instance, if the tenant has a pet and they're not supposed to have a pet, and the landlord can give them a 10. Come into compliance or.
Just for context, Evanston is kind of unique in this regard. Neither the county nor the city of Chicago requires a finding by the city before a tenant can withhold rent. We have Evanston's existing ordinance surrounding cities in that regard.
It's 48 hours owner occupied, whether the issue is on the tenant's responsibility or landlord, it's only 48 hours secured, no matter the issue. Owner occupied, is that?
Yeah, like that most of these issues are gonna be about when the tenant is not complying. For instance, if the tenant has a pet and the lease says no pet. Right now, in the owner occupied could give them a 3-hour notice.
Yeah.
They're saying that that's too short and too quick to, I think in other cases, 30 days. This is just saying, well, let's.
Yeah, I think we've kind of missed the point. I think the issue is the 48 hours, and it's more so aligning that with the 30 days, because 30 days feels like a good enough time on both sides. I don't know if we would want to even go to 10 days. I think that really the issue here is the 48 hours for owner occupied, if I'm understanding this correctly. I'm trying to bump that.
I think there was also some feedback that in some cases, 30 days
It's too long.
It's a really
or
long.
problem
Yeah.
solved.
Yeah.
Because there is,
That would be landlords.
from the landlord standpoint, we're not talking about resolving the issue within 10 days. We're talking about making a good faith effort of trying to solve it. So as an example, when we did the, landlord focus group, what we talked about was if the landlord is actively trying to fix something, but there's a part issue, there's a service availability or anything like that, that obviously gets extended. It's just currently they have 30 days to even start to make progress. In a lot of cases, when we're dealing with most landlords, they're gonna wanna fix something that's not working. But in a few cases, when we have landlords that are not, it can be a really long time.
So my
That's what
understanding
we're
is it
trying to
needs to
balance.
be cured, meaning it needs to be repaired and fixed in 30 days. That would be my understanding of this. And if it's not, I would be fine changing it to reflect that.
Okay.
But, because that was my understanding. We just went to, I don't know if John was there. No, I don't think anybody here was there, but an event that Miss Esther held. And that was my understanding when they talked about kind of the cure period, was it needs to be repaired and fixed in 30 days. And if it's not, then they could, you know, terminate the lease or withhold rent.
Okay.
And I think that's a good enough, 30 days is a good enough time to deal with the issue because of what you said. You might need to order something on both sides. So 30 days feels like a good amount of time for me, as long as it's clear that it needs to be repaired. It needs to be cured. I mean, it's in it's in the language, yeah.
And if it's found that it is not the case and it's just a good faith effort and it is not fully repaired, then you're saying you would prefer to potentially move to 10 days?
Say that again?
I like 10 days to initiate action.
Right.
Like, we're using curing as a single verb, but it's a
Right.
process. So we're in 10 days
Right.
to initiate the process of curing a problem. It seems like these are people's homes and people's property. Both parties should be invested enough that they want.
What do they give, a notice in 10 days saying I've started working on this, or how does,
Yeah, I mean,
what does that look like?
in the case where we've had, essentially in the case when we've had discussion, when it came to, the city having to enforce anything, inspectors had confirmed that if the landlord was providing proof that they were taking action, they would just extend the period for them to be able to fix it, and not necessarily issue any kind of violation or anything, because they were showing that they were taking action to be able to fix it.
Which is
I'm happy to-
different from this, though, because I think, to your point, this is saying, regardless of what property standards does, as the tenant, after that 30-day period, I can exercise my right to terminate the lease or withhold rent. And withhold it if, I guess if the city is involved and says, yes, you've waited the 30 days. So I think that's what you were also trying to make sure it's clear that, yeah.
Just to bring us back to the language of the ordinance a little bit, what the ordinance says is, the tenant delivers a written notice to the landlord specifying that the non-compliance or breach. And what it says is that if that is not remedied within 30 days or 48 hours in the case of an owner-occupied flat, then the tenant can exercise the right to terminate. When we're talking about a tenant's violation, they need to fix it, not just
Right.
start to fix it.
Exactly,
So I think what we're seeing here is that Evanston, in the case of owner-occupied two flats, provides much shorter timelines
Exactly, right.
than surrounding communities. In the case of everybody else, provides longer time.
Yeah.
So, I think what we're talking about is, do we want to come into compliance with, or come into consistency with Cook County and have a more, not, 2 days and not 30 days.
Yeah.
If I could just on this point from the landlord side, if I give someone a 30-day notice and say you have to fix your behavior, and they don't do anything, then I have to go to court, and that's a 6 to 9 month. So I don't know that this is worth a lot of your time here,
Well,
because.
are we talking behavior, or, we're talking material?
Material, so.
Right, so if the tenant doesn't pay their rent, I give them a 10-day notice and say you have 10 days to pay your rent and move out. If the tenant is in non-compliance with some other clause of lease, keeping a pet there, storing personal items that they're not supposed to, I give them a 30-day notice. Then if they blow that off, then I have to go to court. So this is a very small step in a very long process. I wouldn't spend this kind of time on it if I were you. Because this is a very minor issue. I don't think it's well explained by whoever prepared this, and I would move on if you want to add that.
I don't know if one of our guests can clarify.
I mean, I can speak for myself. I think moving the 48 hours at least to 30 days, unless we want to go shorter for everything, I would feel comfortable with that. I think obviously 48 hours is not enough time.
Yeah.
At least putting that in line with what we're already doing, it's 30 days, I would say as a first step makes sense to me. And then if we want to revisit this to shorten it even further, we can look at that.
I have a comment to make on that, and it's that it's also contradictory to the protection that we're trying to offer, or this changes on the ordinance are trying to offer to tenants for non-renewal of leases. This is in essence, we're saying, we're not renewing your lease, and on top of that, you're leaving in 10, 30 days, 48 hours, whatever it is. So if you don't remedy the point, say it's a dog that is a nuisance to other neighbors, other tenants in the building, and we say your dog has to go, I'm not letting my dog go. It's part of my family, right? So we've all been there. And so what do? Now we give the 10-day, 30-day, whatever it is. So how is this aligning with the right that this ordinance, the way it's written, is taking away from the landlord about non-renewal leases, unless it's a just cause or whatever it is that the other part of this ordinance talks about. So it's contradictory in that way also, or wouldn't it? Maybe I'm misunderstanding this.
Well, the difference in the dog example is, the tenant would be signing a lease saying dogs may not be allowed, as an example, and then they take a dog and then they get a notice because they're not complying with the lease. They're breaking the terms, the material term of the lease. In the other balance is the tenant is dealing with an issue with their unit, a repair issue with their unit that's sitting for a long time, and that they need to be repaired. In this case, part of the lease was that the landlord would take care of the unit, so that it's a little bit different.
Right, but
Because in one case, they signed up to do something and they changed their behavior. In the other case, they're just getting protected to make sure that the unit can be in shape.
no, I understand that part from the tenant side, that they want something fixed, and, as you can see by the consensus here, that most landlords want to have it fixed.
Of course.
As quickly as possible. Anyway, so.
I mean, and I could see us going, go ahead, Juan, sorry.
Well, I personally want to be in line with Chicago and Cook County on this, just so it's a little bit more straightforward, just have like 10 across the board, just so we're not like a complete outlier on this.
I can see it depending on the issue, but I don't know how, and I think that was brought up earlier. I mean, but honestly, the way I think it would more naturally work is it would obviously depend on the issue. Like some issues take longer to cure than others. So just saying 10 days doesn't mean anything if you can't get the part in 10 days, for an example.
And there is a difference for essential services.
Can you explain what can you go into that a bit?
Heat would be an essential service.
Heat, like
Right.
heat, water, would be it. They're on a 7-day timeline for.
Yeah, see, I mean, so I guess that's what I'm saying, is the 30 days is for things I would imagine aren't as urgent as those issues that are covered under the 7-day cure period. So 30 days seems like a reasonable time to not, create stressors in the tenant-landlord relationship where there may be enough of them. So that's my 2 cents, but.
So we have one committee member that's looking to keep it as is, one that's looking to potentially align with Chicago. Any other, can I hear any others?
I agree with aligning with, it sounds like Cook County and Chicago already figured, I agree.
I will jump in and say, that I'm fine aligning with the 10-day standard. I just will note that as we're, I would also be fine aligning with a more reasonable standard. I do hear what Councilmember Burns is saying about, making sure that at the end of this period, the item is actually cured. And I think that's important to focus on. So I would be fine with a 30-day to cure period, or a 15-day, 14-day, whatever the case may be, I'll stop there.
So what does that mean? Are you with 10 days or are you with 30 days?
I think you said 14 and 15 is what I
I said a lot of numbers there. I guess at a minimum, I'm fine with the 10 days, certainly. I would be okay if there's consensus to go higher than the 10 days, but I do understand the logic of aligning with Chicago and Cook County.
Sounds like 10 days.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great.
So one thing, I think, Lauren brought up a good point in our conversation. I know a lot of you folks think we're rushing through this. This is a big topic, and, you know, just given the fact that this is our second month of discussing where we even want to direct staff to go when this is written, and we will not be meeting in August, and the soonest we will get some sort of rewritten piece of ordinance will be September, and that will be the first time that we will also come back here to talk about it, and I'm guessing we probably won't be voting on it to put it to council even then, and it'll have 2 more hearings at council, so best case scenario would be like mid-October, November. So we are listening and this is part of the, you know, when we're talking about this, we want to get this right. So it's a lot of figuring out these, you know, these case scenarios, so that's...
Fast track is this directly to council on a special order of business. Like, so every time I hear people, it's like, it's not like this is the slow process. It's like, start that committee and it works through here. So.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I'm not a council member, my name's Lauren Berlin. I work in housing research primarily. I do want to say that thank you all for your time, right? In this setup, we don't get to respond. And that I think we are all listening and trying to figure this out. Sue stepped out of the room. I think that was her name, the one from Connection from the Homeless. But, you know, you all talked a lot about how there's a few maybe bad acting tenants. And I would say the same about landlords. There's a few bad acting landlords. So the problem here is that you have 2 groups of stakeholders, both of whom are mostly really good, right? And so some of this is trying to figure out how to balance those needs. But I at least wanted to just say that. And we will take the time to figure it out. The goal here is to be able to have housing that people can hear you, is what I'm trying.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, okay, good. So I didn't speak out of turn.
No, that's it. I think, all of that to clarify our timeline, our extended timeline, I think was important. So do we have enough? We're kind of all over.
We have direction-ish.
Direction.
Yeah, thank you.
No, that's one.
Right, okay.
That's one we do.
All right, so, next we'd like to discuss the problem of insufficient notice. So our current notice requirement of 30 days is only half as long as Cook County and the city of Chicago. So this is another issue that we are outliers on within the Cook County community. 30 days is not enough time, given how much rent has gone up in the last year. I'm not sure if you guys were able to review all of the slides earlier, but rent has gone up 17% since May of 2022. So that means that if you were to go out and look for an apartment today, it would be about 17% more than it was last year for the same 4 bedrooms that you're looking at. Yeah.
It's higher, I think, nationally, actually.
It is.
Yeah, but it's like,
If I could make a point on that, and I was looking at some listings that are available right now, and, you know, there's a bunch of newer buildings that really are pushing the rents higher. I saw a 912 square foot apartment for almost $3,200 per month, which is almost the size of this room. And it's incredible, but it's one of those new buildings that have all the, you know, the coffee maker on the first floor, and then they have this, that, and the other, which, nothing wrong with that, but, well, there could be something wrong with that, in the sense that it takes away affordability, and because, I was thinking also on that line that first time we saw a Starbucks, coffee shop, and we went in and we go, $3.50 for a cup of coffee? Are we nuts? Now try to go anywhere and get a cup of coffee for a little bit under $5. I don't care if it's Dunkin' Donuts or anywhere. It is about that. So what's happening with rents that are at $3,200 a month for 1,000 square foot, less than 1,000 square foot apartment, is that eventually it's gonna become the norm. So we have to pay attention to that end, and that is what's also driving our average up, not the affordable units that we're talking about in general, not the population that the organizations like MTO and the other organizations that are represented here are talking about their constituents. So I think that we have to be cautious with that high-end rent, because that's where everybody starts aiming to, and we start losing our base of affordable housing. So,
Yes,
but that rent is being driven by those rents significantly. It's just like analyzing the 405 renters that were surveyed, and it ends up being about 3% of the population of tenants in Evanston. So it's minuscule if we don't think about who is driving those rents up in our average. Does that make sense?
So given that rents are really, really going up, how much time should a tenant have to find a new place?
So, we are proposing that we, implement a graduated notice system. Graduated notice based on length of tenancy and graduated notice based on amount of rent increase. We want landlords to give tenants more time to evaluate the market and apply for new apartments. And as we discussed earlier, 30 days is just not long enough, especially with how much more expensive rent is nowadays. So the graduated notice model makes it so that landlords only have to give, let's say, 120 days notice to those people who have lived within their unit for 3 years, as opposed to 120 days notice for everyone. In addition, I think it's important for you guys to know that fair notice based on tenancy is already in effect in Chicago, and is something that is being considered in terms of rent increases.
This is how Chicago's doing it, 60 for 1 to 2 years and 120 for.
Chicago is slightly different than this. Chicago is 30 days for 6 months or less, days for 6 months, 2 years, and then years or more is 100. Context, Cook County is.
That's what I was gonna ask, what's the thinking versus just, really like 90 days, right, like 60? In this market, with people with tight incomes, 60 sounds short, but what's the idea of graduated?
I mean, you know, when we're talking about the Cook County ordinance, we're talking about something that was negotiated and compromised on by landlords.
Yeah, no, sure, yeah.
That's what they came up with. I suspect they kind of split the difference on numbers.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to do a graduated system.
Yeah.
Does theirs consider rent increases too, or no?
Yeah, I mean, rent increases are on the same time frames for, so, you know, basically they're talking about non-renewal of leases, you know, termination of periodic tenancies from month or nature, and then also rent increases. It's essentially the same thing. If you're saying I'm not gonna renew the lease, I'm gonna offer you a lease at a higher rate,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
We're really talking about the same thing.
I'm always willing to give my opinion to this committee. I'm just gonna keep on going. I'm not a landlord, but I am self-employed, and I would not wanna have to follow this algorithm personally of cutting it by, how long you've been there, and then also by the increase. Personally, I would like to see 90 days. Maybe that's actually on there, it's the landlord
Yeah.
for one flat period. I think it's a simple, clean way. I think that there are some areas clearly that are very contentious, and we're gonna have a lot of needles to thread. And I think if we can find sort of clean, simple solutions, maybe we do that. So personally, because otherwise it's like, well, you've been here a year or two, so you merit 60 days notice. Like the market that they have to go into isn't thinking about how long you've been someplace else. The market is still the market. So I think that, you know, am I thinking about this wrong? What do you?
I was just gonna mention, like, strictly passing on something I mentioned to our staff in a meeting was that, you know, fair notice based on the philosophy might be worth considering for the committee, other things taken into children, does somebody have a disability? That we've posed as a community, but, I thought it was an interesting point from the community member that, you know,
I think household size is 100% the biggest factor that I'm getting from people calling.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with 5 people right now that I haven't even passed on to MTO yet, just because the issues are,
That's true, larger families.
but it's just household size. 3 bedrooms is almost impossible to find. 1 bedroom's probably not so much, but anything on the higher end is just tough, because in Evanston, people, they just, once they get those larger units, they don't leave, you know? And some of it gets passed down too. Hey, I gotta, you know, can my brother or the person who's already living here just continue to lease? So I think household size is probably more of a factor that I would care about.
I do want to mention some of the landlord feedback that we received here, because I think it was particularly pertinent, and it spoke to what you were talking about, Lauren. We got obviously very broad, different feedback from landlords, but we got a good amount of landlords that were in support of potentially a longer, like 60, 90 days. But they were all fairly clear about how difficult it would be to manage if we had such, like, if we had the increase based on the tenure, and then the increase of the rents, and having to keep track of all their tenants and what they're doing with the rents, with the tenure and all that. They seemed, see that as quite a bit of a challenge, and did, offer of one flat period as something that would be very much preferred, even if it was, longer than right now.
And we could do it not by household size, because that's also tricky, but we could do it by whatever unit they're in. So if they're in a 2-bedroom, we could be like, if you're in a 1-bedroom, you get, I don't know, 90 days. If you're in anything above a 1-bedroom, you get 120 days. Just because there's so many, the market gets so narrow, is you need a bigger unit, you know?
And again, I'm happy with flat, but if we are gonna consider anything, just based on anecdotally, at least what I'm hearing, it's that. I mean, household size, bedroom size, it's harder to get. The 90 days, I mean, it does take a long period of time for people to find housing, that's certainly true, so the 90 days feels right. I also feel like it's gonna put a bit more pressure on landlords to make a decision on whether or not they wanna renew someone's lease. And so it may make you say no sooner than you otherwise would have if it was 60 or 30 days, because you might work it out before then. And I could see that happening, honestly, because a lot of times they work it out, you know. There's an issue that needs to be cured, it's cured, and before they know they need to notice, it's cured, and then they may be willing to extend the lease. So that would be my only, you know, unintended consequence, is it just makes landlords make a decision 90 days out on whether or not they want to continue that relationship. And obviously, I mean, you could always, I guess, avoid it or whatever. Like you can change your mind. Yeah, you could change your mind, so maybe it's not an issue. But that's the only thing that pops in my head, is just a landlord feeling forced to make a decision earlier than they otherwise would have.
And that was mentioned for 90 days and 120 days, as far as kind of how to navigate a tenant that could be a potential challenge to deal with, and what happens in the last 3 months or 4 months, depending on the 90 days and 120.
So you're talking about the notice to the tenant, but you don't say anything in here about when the, so, you know, for example, a May first lease, and you go backwards, whatever it is, 90 days, and he has until the last day in April to sign a lease, and, you know, the landlord can begin to think about re-renting that apartment till, you know, the last day April, say, and has now missed the May first traditional.
So you're saying the transparency that we're trying to grant to the tenant, we need to get some
The landlord
transparency
should
to
have-
the landlord by
yeah,
having
I don't-
some
I don't-
account, yeah.
Yeah.
Does that actually change, though, whether or not you would have given them 30 days notice? I mean, they could still do the same thing.
And that more is a legal
I mean,
question, right?
yeah.
Like legally, it means something to be properly noticed in law, right? And that, wouldn't that apply in this situation as well?
How does it work?
So typically, or even, I know in Chicago that's dealt with as essentially a limitation on how soon before the end of the tenancy, a landlord can require a tenant to renew. And otherwise it's determined by the lease. So the lease could say, you need to provide X amount of notice on a renew, and as long as it's, you know, not, you know, for such and such a period of. I mean,
I
that's.
see what you mean, yeah.
So we could say landlords need to give 90 days notice, and then it is at the decision-making of it's at the landlord's preference to say how long the tenant has to give them the notice.
We could set a timeline and say you can't require the tenant to renew more than, say, so, you know. I think we're talking about one thing, I don't think this presentation likely addresses the other question, and honestly, I'd have to look at the other ordinance to see whether the other.
What about Cook County and Chicago? Do you know what they do at all? or-
I think Chicago, says you can't, require a tenant to renew more than I believe is before the end. I can look at if that's of interest.
If I can jump in here, right, with the conversation regarding, requiring tenants to give notice, is that what I'm hearing? I want to make sure I'm on base. Yeah, I would say that's, I think, I don't know if we need to give a requirement. I think maybe if there was, certainly that can be implemented in a lease or, you know, certainly a property owner will know, hey, it seems like this tenant has not renewed their lease. They're a month out. You know, I'd say a month, 30 days at most. But I will say, here's one thing. We know that on the North Shore, our housing units, our rental units are 97% occupied. So, right, we're trying to fix an imbalance here. We know that the property owner is going to have a fairly, you know, straightforward time finding a new tenant. It's not going to be very tough. The market is tight. It's going to be a lot harder for the tenant to find new housing in the area. So I just want to keep that dynamic in mind as we're approaching this. So I would aim for no more than 30 days, if we even need to address that in our ordinance at all.
Sounds like we probably don't.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about time to find an apartment or get an apartment. So 30 years ago, I went from commercial to residential, 3 years in residential property management. The process to get an apartment, to a signed lease, so much quicker than it used to be. Because before it was pieces of paper, handwritten, delivered with checks, waiting for payment, waiting for reports that took a while, like a credit report took longer back then. And then the physical mailing of a lease out to them, and then mailing it back. And the process is so much quicker now. And the first viewing of an apartment or a place or a townhouse or whatever they rent, it's all online at night, evening, weekend. And 20 years ago, people used to look at places twice physically and then find the lease. Now, their first look is virtually, and their second look is when they're really serious, they physically go there. Walk up the stairs and go there. So the whole process is so much quicker, especially for someone who is motivated to do it quickly. If they're just like working on Sundays only, yeah, point, it's gonna take a while.
If you have the right credit score
yeah.
and you
Yeah.
make 4 times the rent, I would 100% agree with you.
Exactly, we're talking
You
about,
can,
yeah.
you can pick which units you wanna be
Yeah,
in.
children.
And if it's different than that, I
Yeah.
got 5 people, and I mean this respectfully, like, in knowing that people in this room really wanna help address issues. I got 5 people right now that I am desperately trying to house, and that's what's tripping them up, right? They just don't have, the credit score doesn't necessarily reflect their incomes. They have the incomes, not the credit score, and they don't make 3 or 4 times the rent. And that's what's making it difficult for the people that I'm working right now to find units in Evanston.
Yes, I understand, but like the logistics, like, you know, actual pieces of paper, web signatures.
I agree, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
not the
process,
issue.
yeah, the
That's not the
process,
barrier.
exactly.
That is not the barrier, I would agree with you.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
So,
Just to respond to the question earlier, the Cook County ordinance says tenants cannot be required to renew more than
60 days, okay.
I think it's important to have a requirement around having a maximum of how much they need to give, because there can be sometimes a surprise, and, we could see tenants wanting to give notice and being surprised and then being charged extra fees, like extra months even past their, lease. So it might be something we want to think about as kind of a maximum, so everybody is clear on what they can do.
What do you mean they're charged months after their lease is
So,
up?
we have some, there's a potential for a landlord to, have a month, if a lease is not renewed, to automatically go to month, if they don't give X amount of notice, in their lease, and if there's no limit, then it could be 90 days or 60 days, whatever it is, and then by that point, that means that they contact their landlord maybe 2 months before, and then they still get out on time, but they still owe,
I understand.
yeah,
No, thank you.
that kind of.
So I have a question. On the previous, slide, you had that many support 90 days. When you said many, do you mean the most of the landlords that gave their opinion on that, was it for the 90 days?
No.
Or what, do you recall that, Lindsay? When you say many is
so-
not the most necessarily,
Right.
but it could be. So I just
Right.
want to clarify that.
I meant many, so you could consider it about 50% of landlords in the landlord feedback session supported 90 days, and then the other 50% was around 60 days and 45 days.
Was this at the roundtable? The roundtable discussion?
We
Boy, your perception was way different than mine. But one thing I just wanna say is, if you have someone that's looking for an apartment too, like, if you're gonna say, I'm gonna look 90 days out, you gotta understand, this has to align. If someone has a place for rent, they're most likely gonna rent it in 30 days. They're not gonna rent it in 90. So if someone comes to me and says, I wanna rent a place in September, I'm gonna say, I wouldn't even apply, because it's gonna be rented before you need it. So you gotta be careful here.
I have a question.
You're
Why is
giving
that?
too much notice in 90 days. It doesn't align.
But it's,
I don't think
but
that
there's
you're
a
solving
difference
I don't think
between,
you're solving a problem.
but I wanna understand your point a little bit, like, honestly, I'm not trying to be antagonistic here.
Yeah.
So, if all I'm doing is trying to give more heads up, I'm not saying you have to move out sooner. I'm saying I just want to give you a lot of advance notice that in 90 days this is happening. So you're saying,
So what we
so we're
do-
talking about
you're saying-
other apartments that are in Evanston,
Yeah.
right? So that's the whole thing, the person wants to stay in Evanston. They are also under the 90-day notice requirement. And so can't they go to apartment B and say, my lease will be up, like you're just shopping around until you know your date, and then presumably, no, I see, Tina, that you're nodding your head no, presumably other units would be also clocked on this 90-day period, right? So sincerely, like, I'm trying to understand where there's a lack of syncing up there. We're not saying you have to leave, we're saying heads up,
Right.
right? The
No,
way
I
we
mean,
know
there could-
school's
there could
gonna
be
end
some-
on
there could
June
be
6th.
There could be some that, are further out.
Yeah.
But, what I'm trying to get at is, okay, we send out way early. We say, we're offering a renewal.
Yeah.
It's up to the tenant.
Yeah.
Okay? We don't hear back, we give them a reminder.
No,
Now
because it's good for you
So
too,
now
right?
we're at 90.
Yeah.
Then we go to 60. we still haven't heard, and people are busy, so I did it today, I emailed someone, or I actually texted them. Oh, by the way, yeah, no, I'm not renewing, as a matter of fact, I left. I mean, that's what happened to this one. But, what I'm saying is that a lot of times though, they wait, and then what I'm getting is, you're also saying, I'm saying the flip side, right? The person, if you give them 90 days notice, but they don't have to reply, you know what I mean? If everyone knows it's 90 days, then I think it would line up, right? But if you let them wait until later to say, okay, it's kind of not fair on both sides. So you gotta be careful is all I'm saying. So you wanted to, right? You wanted to give them time to look and have something else to see. Where we all know that the housing is kind of tight and things run up pretty quick. So you want to, you think it's a disadvantage to say that the tenant can do whatever they want. I'm just saying I think the tenant should try to decide.
Absolutely.
Can I interject really quick? I'm sorry, it's hard because I'm virtual, and my apologies. Is that fine, Chair and Lauren?
Could we hear from a woman we haven't heard from in the audience a minute, and then we'll come to you? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So as a tenant, my question is just, what's the disadvantage for the landlord in that notice? Because I've read all the lease documents. There are protections for the landlord. There's a contract signed. You give the tenant 90 days notice. They can respond to you. If they don't respond, you're still renting that unit out in 90 days. And if they leave sooner, they still owe you rent. Then you do the recourse, you have someone come in sooner. To me, my understanding is that as a tenant, it gives them more time to be looking, making sure they can secure a place. As a landlord, you have more time to shop for the right applicant as well. 30 days notice, you're taking in as many people as you can, you're putting in the manpower, the hours you might be falling behind on getting back to your current tenants, or all these other issues that might come up. You give yourself 60, 90, 120 days notice, tenants can prepare, you can tell them that they have to get X, Y, and Z done by a certain amount of time. I would like to hear from the landlords, what's the disadvantage of giving yourself more time to get the right applicants in?
I'm happy to respond to that. So Chicago has done this. 120-day notice is so many leases in Chicago are done, April 30th, May 1. So if you go back to 120 days notice, you're giving people a renewal notice, and some of these buildings give huge increases, that come in, and, you have to give that during the holidays, or right after the first year, after you're in the 120 days. So in many cases, people still have 4 months on their lease, or, 4 months left on their lease. They don't pay attention, they don't know what's going on, why are you sticking me with this? And it antagonizes a relationship, and there's nothing anybody does about it but fight then until finally they get 60 days out and they go, okay, I'm gonna have to find a new place where they stay. So it's not consistent with the market to give 120 days notice. Now, is 90 okay? Is 60 okay? I give my tenants 75 days. I mean, to go too far.
Though, we're only protected 30 days, so maybe your practice is, yes, I'm generous, I give my tenant 75 days. You don't have to under this provision here. So the tenant's not protected from that. You can be generous, but it doesn't mean all the other landlords are.
So Councilmember Reed was ready to chime in.
Thank you. I think I hear the concern that the property owners are giving, and I hear the concern of folks. I think the way to address that as we get to the just cause eviction ordinance discussion, or proponent of this ordinance, is certainly if someone doesn't give notice within, whether it's 2 weeks or a month, 30 days or 14 days, whatever the case may be, we can hash that out. Then the property owner would have the right to rent the unit to someone else, and then that would be a just reason for the termination of that lease if they didn't provide proper notice of intention. And to the gentleman's concern about giving this notice at 90 days or whatever the case may be, 120, whatever, that may be antagonistic to the relationship. I mean, you can clearly put on there and let folks know, hey, this is a city requirement that we give this notice. This isn't me, trying to be antagonistic. You can put it, mandated by the city of Evanston. I must let you know that you can renew the lease and that you have 90 days to issue a notice of renewal. And so I think that's the way to solve that. I do understand the need for property owners to have the time that they need between units. You know, I used to have a leasing license. So I was a leasing agent for a while, and so I understand that it takes a few weeks between tenants to prepare units, and property owners want to make sure that, you know, the units are occupied fully. So I would be supportive of some kind of minimum notice to a property owner.
Minimum notice from the renter.
From the renter, yeah, if it's 2 weeks or whatever the case may be.
Okay. Tina, and then I think we want to wrap up this issue, and it's time to go home.
Yeah, the issue was about sufficient notice for landlords to give their tenants.
Right, yeah.
I just wanted to
Right, yeah.
put that out there.
So, so does this 30 days, is this also for non-renewal? And what happens time you give a notice to your tenant? Terrible tenants. Gave them a notice, they were in shock. You know, they didn't pay the rent, and they had all these extra people and pets and everything, but they were in shock that I'm asking them to terminate their lease. Now, you also have to remember, we always talk about retaliation against the tenants, but I've had a lot of retaliation against me. So if you have a shorter time, then they'll spend their time looking for another place to live instead of destroying my building or disrupting my other tenants in the building. So you have to think about that too. If I give somebody 120 days notice that they weren't expecting, then I'm saying I'm not renewing your lease in 120 days. Imagine what kind of destruction they could do in 120 days if they were not a friendly person.
Okay, yeah. So group, do we know where we're ending up on this? I think
cool with
120
anything.
sounds like too long.
120 too long. I'm cool with anything.
I'm fine with 90.
90 is fine with me. I've noticed that just from talking to landlords that most provide notice way beyond 30 days. That seems to be consistent. I don't know if, I've just noticed that y'all are already probably at 75, 80, et cetera. So I think anything from 60 to 90, honestly, is just bringing it in line with what's already happening.
I'd personally say 90.
Yeah, 90 is good. You know.
90.
Can I just point out that, the Cook County ordinance is 60 days. If you're choosing to go 90, you're going 30 days longer than Cook County.
Yeah.
Chicago said that's 100.
You know, one thing is, if you have a bad tenant, you give them 90 days, that means they're not gonna pay 3 months' rent. If you give them 75, they will not pay 2 months' rent. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because the rent's due on the 1st. So hopefully you're gonna get your rent before you notify them. So,
Well, if I can.
I'm not saying that's the majority.
Yeah,
But
okay.
that does happen.
Okay, Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, thank you. And Chair, if I understood you correctly, are we wrapping up for today? Are we moving on to further items?
Oh, boy, I don't know. I mean, in
Well,
theory.
it's 9 o'clock. I think
9 o'clock.
I think it's fine if we come back to this discussion, which means even more time for this. If I just may, I know that we are, so may I hear your final determination? Are we going to be wrapping up or?
Well, I was hoping we'd at least wrap up this particular issue.
Could I get more feedback, because I'm not sure where we're standing. Are we coming back with 90 days?
I would support 90. I'd make a motion if you need it.
Wait, no, we're just, having a sense of the group so far.
Sure.
My comment is that I find reasonable what they're saying about the 75 days, because then that means that third month has already been paid for, and the risk is minimized for landlords.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I would like to add that if we're giving that concession, then why don't require that the tenant gives notice of they intend to renew the lease 45 days?
Yeah.
So there is a balance there for both sides, and I think that is fair to the tenants. They're given the time necessary for them to look around. My experience is that most of the time, they go look around, and then they see that the increase that they're getting on the rent doesn't compare to what the market is offering for comparable units. That they still have a better situation where they are.
Right.
I just want to mention to that note, just to make sure I understand, if we're saying the landlord is giving 75 days and the tenant's giving 45 days, they
Right.
essentially are still with
30
30
days.
days to find an apartment. We changed the goalpost, but we haven't really given them more time to find.
They can continue on their 45 days if they say, no, I'm not renewing, I'm looking for another apartment, I'm out of here. They have 75 days.
Right. So
Well, they may not
we have
find another apartment. That's what we're trying to solve for, is because the market is so tight, we want to give tenants enough time to either to actually find another unit or actually determine that, hey, I can't find this other unit, so I'm going to stay here for another year. And so I think, a 75-day notice and then a 45-day requirement to renew the lease is certainly too short of a period. I would stick with the 90-day period, and at most I would go to a 30-day period, where, and not a requirement, but that the landlord may choose not to renew if notice isn't given within 30 days, not a mandate. Personally, I'd prefer a 14-day or 2-week period.
We hear what Jack is saying.
Yeah, I don't want to drag this out, I know it's,
Sure.
I just wanted to make a couple points. First, this issue of when the tenant has to notify the landlord of their intention to renew is typically dealt with in the lease. And the way that Chicago and Cook County deal with this is putting a maximum amount of time ahead of the end of tenancy, and that the tenant can be required to notify the landlord. So in Cook County, for example, it's 60 days before the end of the lease. You can ask them to notify more than 60 days before the end. But typically, this is an issue that's dealt with in the lease, and the landlord, within those bounds, whatever they want in terms. As to non-payment of rent during the notice period, if the tenant's not paying rent during the notice period, the landlord can give them a 5-day notice or a 10-day notice or whatever those things are. And they have a recourse, and then they can end the tenancy early if the tenant's not paying. And then the last point is just.
That's not real.
So
I would invite the committee to consider, we're talking a lot about how much time it takes for a tenant to locate an apartment.
Right.
That's only part of the equation in terms of being able to. The tenants have to pay an application fee, they have to pay a move-in fee, they have to pay a security deposit in many cases. And they don't get their security deposit for the previous apartment back until after they've moved out. And there's also moving costs, they have to pay for moving trucks. There's a lot of costs that have to be saved for, is my point, as a tenant is planning for a move. So it's not just about how long it takes a tenant to locate an apartment. It's also about amassing the resources required to move.
Right.
And, this is a consideration that we deal with a lot with low-income tenants. It may be less of a consideration for people of higher income.
Which is why some people hold back on rent, to your point. Not saying that's always the case, but trust me, I've heard people just tell me that straight up, like, I would love to be able to pay it, can't do it. Gotta be able to move that over to the next unit so I can pay for it, so.
And I feel like that is
Are we
I'm not saying
zeroing
it's
in
right.
on a number here?
No, that's right.
I
90 days.
90.
I would be okay with, personally, I want to say two things. One, I would be okay with 75 days, landlord has to give tenant notice, and 30 days, tenant has to give landlord notice. Occupancy rates are coming down a little, likely everyone seems to think will come down, but 30 days is probably still enough time to turn. And to your point, and maybe I'm a sucker, I'm not an elected official, so maybe I'm taking the bait on what I'm about to say here. But I see like a lot of rolled eyes and a lot of groans, and I think we are trying to think broadly about people who don't have as much as probably many of us in this room have. So the system works very well for people with enough. It just does, right? My guess is we all have housing. My guess is we're not at risk of being evicted. And and maybe we are, right? I'm just making a guess here, and I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but I just want to say that some of this is about thinking about people who are not in that position. It's a different set of economics.
Well, think
And we're
about-
not trying
Think
to,
about the people that do take HUD housing like myself, and why don't you change your inclusionary housing?
you know, we're trying. We're trying, no, like, we're,
That's a very simple
I'm not
thing.
all I'm gonna say is we're trying to do our best with a very complicated
Right.
set of interests.
Right. So my question to staff is, do you have enough of a direction from, I think we're settling on, well, we have 90 versus 75. What is?
I thought you said 90.
I had 90, I have
I'm the lone
94.
Oh, you said
I
75?
said 75.
We do have one
Yeah,
75.
I'm not gonna
I'm
do
cool
that.
with 75 for
Burns
90.
You're
for
75.
90, Reed for 90, Kadar Tarif for 90, Ravel for 90, Hugo 75, Lauren 75. Has any of that changed? We had a couple at 75, a couple at 90. Are you,
Well, I think
Is
a
there any
couple of
consensus?
people said that if everyone wants 75, they'll go down.
okay.
I'm not gonna go to the grave on 75.
Yeah, I'm cool with 90. I mean,
they're bigger.
Okay.
I think the reality of what I'm dealing with at least is that people are saying I'm not going to, the landlord is saying I do not plan to renew the lease.
Right.
And so this whole thing about, I mean, I wish it was that relationship where it's like, oh, but you can let me know if you want to stay. That's not what I'm finding is the issue. I think landlords and tenants can work that out on themselves. What I'm finding is the relationships with the landlord is like, you got to get out at the end of the lease. In that situation, you just need more time. So with that, I think 90 days is a good amount of time.
I like the idea, and it sounds like you were saying this is not necessarily our place, but I do like the idea that landlords have some protection that, you know, they have at least 30 days. The person has to decide within 30 days. Like, I don't want to shrink, I want the person, I want the renter to have some net benefit, more time to find a place to live. I want the landlord to have enough time to market the apartment, repair it, and turn it over. So to me, 75, 90, 30.
Which, to be clear, Ms. Berlin, or Committee Member Berlin, what that means is that under what I think we're moving toward now is the tenant really has 60 days to make a decision. And I think what the committee is saying that we're fine with that the tenant would have 60 days ultimately to make a decision.
Or 90 days when they know they have to leave.
Or 90, yeah.
Right, the landlord knows they're not renewing the lease for whatever reason.
Right.
And obviously just cause may address this.
Right.
So, or 90 days if they know they have to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this discussion took a little longer than we were expecting. So we will,
I think it's,
we'll be resuming this discussion at our July meeting, but we do need to vote on canceling our August meeting. Because basically, I think city meetings and everything sort of stopped the last couple of weeks of August, so that's why.
Yes, I will move that we
So,
cancel our August meeting.
so I just want to, okay, so we have a motion to,
Second.
Right.
cancel.
Discussion.
I think we came down on 90-30.
We did.
Oh.
90-30, yeah.
90-30, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And then I just want to make sure, so we're, stopping the presentation on this topic, which is is that slide 25, Lindsay? 24? 25, yes.
And Chair.
So we'll back up next meeting, starting slide 26, which would include just cause and non-renewal and all the broader topic.
Right.
Are we,
It actually begins with right to, organize, protection for survivors of gendered violence.
Okay,
I just wanna
sure.
clarify wherever that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Running
We
the,
still have to vote to
discussion for the
jump
small landlord assistance expansion to next month.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, on the floor to, cancel our August meeting,
I second it.
and all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And then I think, we will consider ourselves adjourned for tonight.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I do have a question after.
Sure.
Yeah,
Go
if I
ahead,
can
Councilmember.
just quickly jump in, and sorry, I'm going to take about 2 minutes, because I do want to address, I know that we're going to discuss it next meeting, but there's some folks in the room who may not be able to attend, and they gave a lot of public comments earlier. and I just want to clarify so folks don't walk away from this feeling like we're moving in a direction that we're not. Particularly with just cause, the just cause eviction portion of this ordinance, I want to note that nothing in the just cause ordinance would prevent a property owner from removing a tenant who is causing property damage. That is a just cause to evict someone or to not renew a lease. I want to be clear that just cause eviction would not prohibit a property owner or manager from removing someone who's sexually harassing other tenants. Sexual harassment is against the law. That is a just cause. If they're causing infestations and causing unsafe, uninhabitable living conditions, that is a just cause to evict someone. And there's talk about, us interrupting the free market. We're talking about housing, not fidget spinners or something else. We're not looking to tie the hands of property owners. There's again, good tenants can stay. Nothing in this ordinance or the proposal would change that. And quote unquote bad tenants or folks that have fallen on hard times, those folks can still be removed for non-payment for all of the issues I named before. Someone said that the ordinance proposal gives tenants more rights than a property owner. That's just not true. It gives folks basic rights to stable housing. And if for some reason, because that same person mentioned that, hey, I have an ADA unit and I'm getting older, I may want to move into that unit. Or someone last time mentioned that they may have a parent who is elderly, that they may want to move into one of their units. Guess what? This just cause eviction ordinance has a clear provision that would allow someone in that very situation to occupy. I'm sorry?
That's why we're discussing. It's not written yet. It's not written yet.
I haven't seen that on any of the stuff that's been.
Well,
it's not written yet. Yeah.
Well, there's certainly thank you. There's drafts out there. You look at what I put forward, what's in the Chicago ordinance, and all of the documents that I've been working with do not include this. And so folks would still be able to move in. And I want to be clear that that's my intention, whether folks are saying that or not. This is meant to just level the playing field and to make sure that we are creating stability. Someone said that people rent for flexibility. As a renter, and every renter I've spoken to, we're not renting for flexibility. That might be a luxury that some people have to be able to move around. Most folks are renting because it's their only option. They don't have $10, $20, $30, $40,000 to make a 10%, 20% down payment for a property that they can own. I'm jealous of my mother who owns a house and pays less for her mortgage and other assessments than I do for rent. I would love to be able to pay a lower mortgage than I do for rent and actually build some equity. Most renters are in that spot too. And then lastly, there's discussion about, slowing this down or holding it up and saying that we should create committees. If I can just ask my colleagues on this committee to raise their hand if you own and rent property. I know Mr. Rodriguez, committee member Rodriguez does. I believe we have another committee member who owns and rents property.
Joanne Salome.
Yeah, Ms. Salome owns, committee member Salome owns property. I don't believe she's here today. So we have a couple of property owners on this committee. And as you can see, committee member Rodriguez and Ms. Salome, who's not here, are surely representing the values and interests of property owners. And that's valuable to have them on this committee. And so I just want to assure folks that we are not looking to tie anyone's hands. We're just simply looking to create stability to address the housing crisis that we are already facing, not make it worse. And I am willing, and certainly the members of this committee are willing, to hear the feedback of property owners to make sure that we're making sensible policy that actually achieves our goals. I'm not looking to, as a renter, as a representative of the city's ward with the largest Black population, with the highest rates of childhood poverty, with folks who are struggling, I am not looking to make the situation harder for my residents. I'm looking to bring results for my residents, to make living in Evanston not just the most investment-friendly city, which I heard earlier, to make this the most human-friendly city in our country. And so just with that as a goal, and I know not everyone in the room is going to believe that this is genuine, but reach out to me, reach out to my colleagues. We're willing to hear you in this setting and other settings, and incorporate the feedback where the research and our values align. And so with that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Burns, did you have a
I
last?
was actually gonna go in the same direction.
Okay.
You nodded and said, well, let's take a look at it. I mean, honestly, as you were going through it, everything you said sounded like material noncompliance to me as this graph has been drafted. And so I was just like, that's oftentimes the issue. There seems to be a misalignment between kind of what we're looking at and what the community is perceiving is occurring. So I would just double check that and make sure you looked at that correctly. And obviously my colleagues have already mentioned that we haven't nothing is set in stone. It's in the this is page, I hate it when there's like a bunch of different page numbers on here, but I don't know. What page is it?
packet with the?
A page here and here.
Have they gotten
The packet is
56 pages altogether, that packet?
Yeah, and I think so if you're going off to 56, it's page 46, you see kind of a graph that shows the background on just cause.
And there was also mention, when we did the landlord outreach session, which I spoke with many of you, because you were at my table, and that is one topic that we specifically called out during that outreach.
And then also see applies only to buildings 7 or more units. I don't know if that's something that was also discussed, but I heard a few people mention that they have buildings with fewer units than that, and I don't think it's in the aggregate, is my understanding. It literally applies to only if there's a building with 7 units. So there's some people that may have vocalized strong opposition to this that it may not even apply to. So I would just look at page
Where on the city
15
website is the
or
document?
46, yeah.
Where
On
on
the Housing and Community Development Committee page.
okay, so on our committee's page of the city
Yeah,
website.
you go down to the meeting date, and then there's a packet.
Yes.
Okay, so go to tonight's meeting date. There should be a downloadable packet that sounds like it's 56 pages long. If you look on page 46-ish, there's something that says something like background, just cause. It's a graph, it's not a narrative. I'm sure it creates as many questions as it answers, but it's hopefully a helpful starting point.
And there'll be a robust discussion of this particular topic next month.
Right, because not everything, this is an inspiration.
Yeah.
Can I just offer that,
Sure.
that, like, folks at Open Communities and LCBH have also helped to write a draft ordinance of a just cause for eviction ordinance in Chicago that's not yet passed, and working on. Even if we don't agree on the issue, I'd be happy to just help you understand what that law looks like. It's one of the ones that, I think, offering up as a model for Evanston potentially. So again, even if we don't agree on the policy issue, I would just like to clear up, because again, there was a lot of things mentioned that were material non-compliance, non-payment of rent, that are absolutely for reasons that folks.
Could you also bring a couple of examples of what will not be just cause to not renew? Because that will probably clarify.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I'd be happy to talk about it in depth, that kind of, I'm sure Jonathan will.
I think once we get to it, we're gonna have a lot of information for everybody.
Right.
I mean, can we have a meeting just on it feels like we need a lot of, can we have a meeting on just cause? And I feel like this is sort of the behemoth around which a lot of things are attached, right? Because, to this point earlier, one policy only works depending on what we decide about just cause. It just seems like the idea that we're gonna cover all of this in July or September.
Well, but just cause is like, we just have a couple of smaller items before the just cause.
Right, we have a few items around right to organize, supporting, gendered violence survivors.
Like, these were small items.
I know.
I'm just being honest, right? Like, I feel like gendered violence is gonna be a slam dunk, but short of that, I don't think anything here is
Right.
That's.
And I'd just like to add that there is, a lot of information in the packet from February and from last month, which is also in this month's packet.
So I did want to, because I just want to make sure that we have everything that we need. Do you feel like you have everything that you need as far as?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll start with just cause.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Right,
And,
thank
yeah,
you. And I wanted to thank our guests that came from LCD.